This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with David Hern. You're an actor and author, and I want to welcome you to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Pam. I'm very thankful to be here. Thank you.
Now, we do have your imdb.com, and if you do have a better URL, we could add a different one, but that's the primary one we were given.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one you want. So
Yeah.
that's cool. So that's there, and people don't have to worry about remembering that.
Right.
Because you'll be able to click through it on all the places in the description of the podcast. So for anybody who wants to click through on that, anywhere the podcast is right now, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. That will be clickable, so you won't have to remember it, but it's up there. And want to remind the audience that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. You see that little icon says listen on Newsly. If you want to check out what that's about, it's an audio-only version of the podcast. If you use coupon code GHOST, you can check it out for 30 days. So that's where we start. But a couple questions we asked before we really get into the meat of the interview. We asked every guest, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me? Well, as I say in my recently published book, How Not to Make It in Hollywood, I think I knew I was an actor when I was 5 years old, because that was my first gig. That was the first time I was on stage as a child. So if I remember, I felt serious about it. So I remember very, very young saying, oh, okay, this is me. This is what I do. It was like second nature. It wasn't really a decision. Mm-hmm. So, and now all these years later that I've been doing it my whole life, I can say I do it for love and for fun, interchangeably.
I find that a lot of creative people, that if you get to the core of it, they do it because they love what they do, and then like this happens to be a result of whether or not they're successful with it or how it makes them feel. Like I know a lot of musicians, because I'm a musician, that even though they might not be the biggest thing in the world, they just love to play. So if you're a sax player, you're a horn player, you're a bass player, you play because you love it. Whether or not you're up there with Taylor Swift or not doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you love to play, and so you love to do, or you love to paint, or you love to be an actor. You love to draw, you love to be a photographer. It seems like that is the purpose, not the purpose to actually be the biggest light.
It's the doing of it. The actual doing of it. That's the reward. As I say in the book, by the way, How Not to Make It in Hollywood, available on Amazon Books, you have to approach it with joy, because then it won't matter so much if you don't get a part or, something doesn't go 100%. Doesn't really matter. When you love it, any opportunity to do it is gravy,
Yeah, it's kind of like the law of attraction. Because if you're anxious and you're always worried about like what happens, like a lot of times it becomes like a paralysis. Like a lot of musicians will have all these demos, will have all these tracks. Right. They never present them. Like the painter never presents any of their poem. Their paintings, they're sitting in the loft and they never get to the gallery. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Like sometimes you have to put stuff into the world, and you have to have that vulnerability, right? Like, because
also as an actor, sometimes since you're not the writer, you're the actor. Well, I'm a writer on this side, and then this part here is the actor. You're not responsible for the dialogue. So you're not responsible even whether it's a good movie or not. What you're responsible for is doing the best you've got to the situation, bringing what you've got to it and doing it to the max. And then the rest is out of your hands anyway. Sometimes the movie's a success, sometimes it isn't.
But it's how you actually, as an actor, right? You can describe your craft, but it's like the writer put the words down, but how you deliver them is your secret sauce. It's like that, how you use your eyes, your hands, your body movement, the expressions you do with your face, like what you don't say, has as much to do with what you do say, right? Or how you actually present the character, right?
Right. Who was it? Maybe it was Dizzy Gillespie. I'm not sure. who said it's not just the notes, it's the space in between the
Yeah, the
notes.
silence. Yeah, between it.
Yeah,
It is
the
the
silence in
space.
between. I feel
Yeah,
the
it's so
same way
important.
about performance, about dialogue. You know, there's a poetry to it if you do it right. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because I was watching some things about silent films. I was watching something on Turner classic movies, and there was a lot you could learn from just what they had, they used what they had. They didn't have sound, right?
Right.
They had the music behind it,
Right.
that type of acting sometimes it gets lost, like what you can do.
Right.
When you see a really good master, say like an Orson Welles movie,
Or
uh,
Chaplin.
Chaplin.
When you look at his early stuff, you're right. No dialogue. He had to communicate everything with his eyes and with his physicality. And
Yeah,
yet you understand exactly what he's getting at, you know? That was
yeah.
his art form. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so important because like how you interpret like your script is kind of like I've always been this person into stream of consciousness kind of
Mhm.
flow state, and it's like when I'm playing like a jazz fusion type of artist, like it is what the room feels like right at that
Yeah.
moment, and like
Yeah.
who you're with at that moment, the lighting, the sound, the feel of the stage, the feel of the auditorium, like that's what's going to dictate like what that performance is. And it's a point in time, and it's not gonna be like yesterday. It's not gonna be like
Right.
tomorrow.
And
It is what
everyone's
it is.
different.
Yeah. And so you make a choice is like which cut do you want? You could record all the performances for that year and then figure out which one is the one you want to present.
Mhm.
Or do all of them have value? So you put together a collection. But the idea, to me is like trying to be perfect. I kind of am a purveyor of the happy accident. I don't know what your thoughts about that is, like, how much you
No,
go
no,
into
no.
trying to
Some of
get
the best
something
line
down.
deliveries happen that way. Yeah. Just a flu or whatever, something that happens in the moment. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially,
Um,
like, in stage plays, right? Like, you do stage plays. So, like,
well, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of stage. Yeah.
I mean, how is that differ from, like, when you do film,
Oh,
the
it's very
approach?
different. It's very different. Theater is by far the most physically taxing because there's an intensive rehearsal cycle. Then you go into performance, and you have to deliver full energy every night, no matter what. So I've been in many stage shows, and usually by the end of the run, I sort of welcome it because it'll get you. A film is so parcelized, everything is takes and little individual pieces, which is a different science. It makes you act in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, oh, if I can throw another plug out, I have a movie which I am actually going to the first screening of in a couple of nights called Thirsty, which should be coming out. Well, I'll find out at the screening. I did
Awesome.
the job about a year and a half ago, and the movie should be coming out shortly.
Like an
Um,
independent film?
I'm sorry.
Is it an independent film?
Yes, it's an independent film called Thirsty. It's written and directed by a woman named Emily Abt, and Kyra Sedgwick is in it, Thora Birch, some well-known guys from TV, and myself.
Is that getting
And
a theatrical release? Is that or is it going
yeah, I
direct?
think so. Well, I'm
Awesome.
going to see it in a theater, and I'm sure they should have some update about the distribution.
That's
Um,
awesome.
it's an intelligent script. It's a little bit political. It has to do with a lot of relevant issues. It's very leveled. The basic story is about a woman who is trying to balance young kids at home and a husband and a job she has at the public defender's office with her desire to run for Oakland mayor. That's what this central story is about. Her run for the mayorship while she's juggling all this other
All those
stuff
roles.
in her life.
And that's really
Um,
relevant today with so many women in the workplace and so many people are kind of like, oh, you should have gender roles, and there's so many arguments about like,
Yeah,
are you going to be able to match, the guy, right?
right.
The guy has a family too. You expect
Mhm.
like, but like, what's his obligation to his family versus your obligation as a woman to your family? Like
Right.
expectation gap. You can
And
dive
then the
into it,
movie
or you can
delves heavily into that, into all those obligations and, politics and
that's really
social
that sounds
situation,
really
the
good.
whole thing. Yeah.
That's
Um,
awesome. So what's it like to work? You said that was like a year and a half ago you worked on
I,
it, or
I,
that's
I did
when
the job a year and a half ago, and the movie's just coming out
or
now.
now? Yeah,
Um,
it's the interesting thing about when you do work as an artist. Sometimes your stuff doesn't,
yeah, it
you know,
takes a
it
while. It
takes a
takes a while.
while to get it to somebody. You could have been,
Right.
I'm working on something for like a year and a half,
Oh,
and like that's
except for TV, though.
TV
TV
goes
happens immediately, whether you like
usually.
it or not. You know, I had a TV gig in San Francisco, I don't know, a bunch of years ago, and that filmed and it was on the air, I think, within a month, within
Wow,
three
it's
or four
fast.
weeks, particularly if it's an episodic because they're
Episodic,
turning
yeah.
it out. Yeah. Um, but
So
yeah,
is there any
films,
kind
they
yeah.
take a lot longer.
So the thing about film sometimes is people don't realize, right, is a lot of times, from my understanding, is like things aren't always filmed sequentially. Like you actually might
That's
be
right.
doing like a climax scene near the beginning of the movie, right?
That's
You might be
right.
doing so like, is that really hard to get your head around as an actor, get yourself into space
You
for that
have to be
scene when
able
it's
to
not in
kind of
sequence?
segment everything, because yeah, it's all going to get put together. Remember, I had a TV gig a bunch of years ago where there's a scene where I'm having an argument with this guy in an office, and then I go storming out into the hallway, and he follows me out in the hallway. Okay, it was shot in two pieces: the part where we go out in the hallway, and then the part in the office where I turn and go outside. We shot the second half of it first. But then it was like kind of backwards. Now we're going doing what comes before that. So yeah, you have to kind of keep the continuity in your head.
The
Um,
context. Is there any
right.
kind of like, do you get a lot, like I guess an actor reads of where the continuity is based
Yeah.
on like what you're gonna do. But in
Right.
terms of like with the director's like choices,
Oh,
is
that's my favorite thing. I'm glad you kind of
like
mentioned
what
that.
how do the director choices
I
interact
love
with the
working
actor?
with a really good director because they help you. They're the one with the overall vision of what the whole package is going to look like. And they're trying to get your piece of it right. The woman who wrote and directed this movie, Emily Abt, very talented, thoroughly enjoyed working with her. Um, a really good director knows exactly kind of how to get what they want.
For that scene.
Right. Yeah. Or how to just, change maybe just one little beat or one little line, you know, really
Do they
kind
have
of be
to
a
like get
craftsman
to
with it.
know do they get to know you as an actor and then realize how they can use you, or do they just because they observe you, they
The
figure it
good
out?
ones do.
They
The
do the
good
research
ones,
ahead of time.
yeah, the good ones have an intuitive, sense of what they can get from a given actor. Um, and then I mean, look, not everybody is an artist. Some guys are more work a day.
Yeah,
May
yeah.
not even care if they're artists or not. Um,
Workman. So the workman kind of aspect versus like the real creative,
yeah,
artistic. So
yeah.
what do you like working with the more artistic type of director rather than the
Well, I
workman
consider
director?
that to be more exciting. It's more
Mhm.
fun because when you're dealing with somebody who's got all kinds of, highfalutin ideas, it challenges you to try to get what they're trying to get out of you. If the director's more utilitarian, it's just about you move from there to there, and the line goes here. You can execute, do the best you can do, fine. But it's more exciting for me to try and help a director get their vision delivered the way they want it. Yeah, that's the challenge. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's the human aspect of it, the create. Because like if you're a musician, you're working with a producer. You got like a George Martin type of producer
Oh
who's
yeah.
going to
Yeah.
challenge, your perception, right? So like the Beatles, like they were just playing in like in Hamburg, what they
Right.
could do, what you could physically do in Hamburg live. And then a guy
Right.
like
And that
George
was
Martin
it.
looked at this, hey, we can use the studio like an expressionist painting and we can
Right.
layer. That means we
Yeah.
can actually do things that you can't do live, right? We can do backward tape looping, all kinds of weird effects and layering of sounds and
Hmm.
shadow vocals, all these things, right? So if you once you realize that it's a canvas, right? Like I would think, like so, if a film
Hmm.
director sees it as like a video canvas,
Right.
and you start looking at like, well, if I use this angle or this shadow or this lighting, and then use the way you say it or you don't say it,
Hmm.
um, they have more weight to what you're doing than somebody said, "Oh, just walk in the door."
Yeah. Yeah. Also, really good directors will understand when they have a limitation too. Like if they're dealing with an actor who maybe isn't that capable, a really good director still knows exactly
How to
what
police it.
direction to give them to get that desired result. You know,
Yeah,
um,
you can make magic out of everything. It's kind of like you get
I
a
had a
guitar
number of
player.
good coaches over the years too. I was very lucky. I studied with a lot of really good character actor instructors.
So in
Um,
terms of your story as an actor, like you said, you started very young,
yeah.
5 and 6 years old. When did you feel like you had a? It sounded like you already knew you wanted to be in it,
Oh
but
yeah.
do you ever felt that like you were? I guess, do you like to feel like David Bowie had this statement about art? He's like, I like to put myself where I'm treading water because I don't feel as creative if I just like can just know I'm gonna just ace it. It's
Right.
not interesting to me. I want to put myself in a
In the
situation
book,
where it's a challenge.
I talk a little bit about live auditioning, which unfortunately COVID kind of turned that into a thing of the past. But I used to love the danger of that. It was
Mm,
really exciting. You're going to walk into a strange room of people you never met and just go for it,
go for it. Mhm.
deliver. It's like a major league at bat. You're going to
Yeah,
swing for the fences, or maybe you're going to strike out. But
yeah.
the excitement of it was fun. Unfortunately, this I kind of nowadays most auditions are home taped.
Oh wow.
You drop it in a
So you gotta
Dropbox,
really get
and
that live feel. So you can't
yeah,
get nobody's doing it live, even though they could do live. They're not.
right. But I mean, there was something. When you walk into there's actual people there,
It's
you have a
different.
miniature audience. There's some
Yeah, it's like
energy to
live
work with.
TV, like doing a live TV, like when they used to do like Playhouse 90,
Right,
to be able
right.
to do a Playhouse 90 versus a Twilight Zone that's filmed, right?
Hmm.
Rod Serling, like you do a Playhouse 90, you got to get it, that's live. So
Yes.
there's something about that that's really intoxicating to me.
My father was a stand-up comedian and worked in the early days of live television. He was on soap operas.
Oh, wow.
Um, I don't know, man, it might have been Days of Our Lives. I mean, it was one of the earliest soaps.
Oops.
Um, and he would tell me about that. Um,
That's a really cool. I
yeah.
remember, well, I've always like, I'm into like a lot of classic TV, and I would go back and look at the tapes of those Playhouse 90s,
Hmm.
like Requiem for a Heavyweight, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
but
Great stuff.
yeah,
Great stuff.
yeah, there was even a season of the Twilight Zone where they actually did some of them live, from my
Oh
understanding,
yeah. Uh-huh.
and
Wow.
where you can see the difference in the film, like when you actually see that it actually looks different than
Yeah.
the ones that were like actually filmed, you know, in the can versus the ones that were live. They say have a different
Hmm.
look to them.
Hmm.
But so that did just it's just interesting. As you were talking about, your dad was known for like his appearance in the Rob Reiner film, like in
Yes.
Harry Met Sally, right?
Hern Met Sally. Yeah. Um, he My father was the best man at Carl Reiner's wedding, and Carl's son Rob Reiner directed Harry Met Sally.
Oh wow.
So my father was in the movie, um, playing kind of a silly old character with his wife sitting next to him. Um, it's funny. My father was a very intellectual guy, and yet he always got cast as a little bit more, kindly old little simpleton, old Jewish guy. So it was always funny to see him playing those kind of roles, because I guess that's what he looked like.
Oh, it's kind of like what his feel was, but like on his appearance,
Yeah,
is like okay, we can use that.
right.
So, have you ever felt like the typecasting type of thing, or because you're more like in a situation where you are able to pick the kind of roles you want? Are you kind of put
Well, there are casting directors, which it's their job to kind of sort people into groups that are recognizable. In fact, in the early days when I was looking for an agent, which was one of the hardest things for some reason in LA, I used to hear, well, we already have someone of your type. And I would think, really? You have a Dave Hern type? What type might that be?
kind of surface level impressions.
Right. And so I said, well, wait a minute. What if he's busy doing a job and then a Dave Hern role comes up? You might need me. So, I got tired of those kind of stupid arguments. It's like, come on, just sign me and get me to the auditions.
Yeah, it's kind of like you gotta be able to get in front of somebody and show what you can do.
Yeah. You can't take your shot if they don't let you in the shooting gallery. Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely that's always like the rub today. Like they think everybody's got to have 100% of something without like taking the chance. Everybody wants to be so certain that you got 100, like you've done, like maybe you don't want somebody that hasn't done that before.
Oh,
maybe that's the advantage.
Every great actor, every single great actor has some turkeys, every single one, because not every movie is good. And if you want to work, you got to work. So, even the greatest actor in the world has a couple of turkeys they'd rather not talk about. But that comes in the box. That's part of the deal.
Yeah, it's part of the deal. I mean, you got to give, it's the chicken egg. It's like, when you going to get the experience when you let me do the role?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You got to let me do it. It's like, how am I ever going to get there? But like, maybe you're talking about like
easy stuff.
But you were talking about like how actors get parts in movies, and you're talking about the agent. Are there other ways besides the agent in the booking agents and things like that? Is there other
agent and casting director? They're the two big players. Every show or movie has a casting director. The casting director interacts with all the agents who are busy submitting pictures and resumes of their clients, try and get them work. Casting director's job is to sort of narrow it down and get just a little handful of actors who fit the general category of the character that they're looking for. And then you go in and you get it or you don't.
Is there any kind of secret sauce to the chemistry between actors? Like when the casting director is doing that, are they considering the chemistry?
I call that magic. I mean, I've been in plays and in shows where sometimes you get cast and you meet the person you're going to be working with, and there's an immediate rapport there, or like a communicative type energy going back and forth. That happened on one TV show. I met up the actor. I hadn't even met him. I was already cast opposite this guy, and we just got right into the rhythm. It was great. That doesn't always happen. You can't always kind of get the mix you're looking for. But yeah, at least for me, I've immediately noticed when that's happening.
You can feel it, like the vibe. You get the vibe.
Right.
It's kind of like in your band, right? If you're in a band and you're putting the band together,
right? How well do you guys play together? Yeah.
If there's nonverbal communication, it's like drummer just immediately plays the right drum patterns that go with the bass guitar player and doesn't have to tell them. Like what I like, I've run into this. If you got to ask me what key we're in, you got to ask me what the chords are. Like you ask me, like the time, and like you can't hear it. Like if you got that, then usually probably not playing with you.
What's your instrument?
I'm a keyboardist,
Your
synthesis. So
keyboard.
I play
Oh,
like well, I'm a synthesis, so I actually do sound design. So I have
mhm.
Moogs and old
Oh,
school
okay.
modulars, and like I'm not one of these new kids just playing like samplers. I
Yeah.
actually play a Moog and actually spend time building my sound before I even play it. I
I
actually
played
build
guitar
my
for
own.
40 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of hard today because a lot of people don't. They want you to just walk in with a CDJ and not sound
Oh,
check. And like
uh-huh.
my stuff, you have to sound check.
Mhm.
You know, they want you to just walk in with a SD card and go into onto a laptop. I'm like, that's not how I play. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But what do you think of like what's going on with the technology and people thinking
Well, I will
that,
say this, and I rarely pay much attention to what's going on with the union. I am in the Screen Actors Guild. I only pay attention when something relevant's going on. But there was recently a contract negotiation where AI was getting ready to take over.
yeah,
We
that's
were
what I'm
on the
wondering.
verge of losing millions of jobs. And luckily, the union
Oh,
leadership was
fuck.
very strong and they held the line on the negotiations. And AI has been, put aside contractually to maintain these jobs for actors. So I'm very glad about that. Um,
I think it's real important because the problem with the tech is sometimes the tech gets ahead. Just because you can
yeah.
do something doesn't mean you should actually do it. So the problem with the tech people is they have this mountain to climb and they hit the top of the mountain and they don't think about, well, you know what you just did? They all they care
Mhm,
about is they're so narrowly focused on reaching that mountaintop of technological
mhm,
innovation. They don't consider like I've actually run into some AI technologists because I'm in
mhm.
software that don't seem to have a respect for artists at all. They
There
just
are AI actors,
yeah, I
completely,
understand
che-
that.
you know,
I'm kind of wary of it. I'm very
yeah.
wary of
So,
it
I mean,
because
that makes somebody like me useless.
well, they
Why
want
should
to
we
spit
pay
in
an
your face
actor?
and just put like people in use your face and then license it, and
Yeah.
then eventually have AI robotics take your voice
Mhm.
and totally like CGI you into a scene. And if you sign the contract in the wrong way legally, you won't be
Right.
working anymore.
In the old days when they were shooting things like Cleopatra and those type of movies, they had, thousands of extras on a
Yeah.
huge sound stage.
Now we're gonna just dump them in
Nowadays,
there.
they can generate the extras around the edges and
Yeah.
just shoot the leads.
I still think
Yeah.
it changes the feel. Like if you have a movie and you're a director, and if you actually want to go big, like a Francis Ford Coppola or something, you're doing some big, like I think there's a reason to have that vibe. But
Mhm.
I guess from a cost perspective, it's like okay, we're going to cut the cost. But
Mhm.
are the cost cutting like angle versus like the creative angle? Does that get to like certain directors might have the weight to say, "Hey, I'm not doing that because I
Mhm.
need to have that feel for this scene, and I want it to be big, and I want to
Mhm.
go big. I want to do this big epic."
Yeah. I like that. I hope, I still, hold out hope that over the years, while I'm still here, that I get to work with some more really, really talented director, producer type people. I've
Yeah,
been
guys.
lucky up to this point. I think so. I really hope it continues. Um,
But I think it's really important to think about the creative spark. Like you
yeah,
said, your performance, how you interpret, like AI just does what it learns on,
what you tell it to do.
and what it
Yeah,
learns on is anything that's been done in the past. And then
right.
it randomly can move things around to make it look like it's new. Like, so it's
Mhm.
basically taken all this known knowledge it learns in its learning library, and then it seems like it's doing something like new, but it's just randomizing it and applying it in certain scenarios, but it's all based on stuff that's already happened,
Mhm.
right? And so the human being is taking that situation, and it's their personality, it's their inputs, it's the muse, it's all
See, I
these
don't want
things.
that to ever leave. I don't want that to
That's
ever
all
leave.
human.
I mean,
That's all
some of
human.
my favorite movies have maybe 3, 4 characters shot on a couple of locations. It's amazing what miracles you can make with really good writing and a really talented cast and director. You don't necessarily need a million gazillion, bells and whistles.
Yeah.
But that reflects the artistry of the individual.
I think it's real important to allow that kind of human spark of
Mhm.
creativity and not just monetize it and turn it into like in music we have an issue where what we call fast food music, um,
Yeah.
because of people using like their digital audio workstations and they can just loop
Oh,
and
right.
clip things together versus like something like think in the 1970s the singer songwriter doing live takes, maybe third or fourth
Right.
take on Yellow Brick
There's
Road like
nothing
John.
like them, though, when
Yeah,
you
there's
hear
nothing like
those early
doing that
recordings.
kind of work. What do you think
There's
about the
just an
Stones?
energy that you can't beat.
Like the Stones on Exile on Main Street. How is
Mhm.
AI ever going to replicate
Yeah.
that kind of feel, right?
Yeah.
Or the Velvet Underground. Is it ever
Right.
going to replicate that kind of feel, like ramshackle? Kind of. If you think about Neil Young in Crazy
Right.
Horse, and
Right. Right.
when he
That
does
kind of
his
trashy kind of,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
ramshackle kind of vulnerability,
When
and like
it's not too perfect,
yeah.
not too polished.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
said he was gonna go into the ditch after harvest, and he had this ditch trilogy of albums that, they kinda on the beach, like,
Mhm.
Time Fades Away, and, the other album that's famous, but the idea in that idea is like there was vulnerability, he would have the wavering in his pitch in his voice, everything's maybe second, third, fourth take, not going crazy, letting it be, like, live performed,
Yeah. Yeah.
real intent and
Right.
having the vulnerability in his voice where he could be like Buffalo Springfield and all the other groups he ended with. He could do a perfect vocal performance if he wanted to, right? Have the pitch like but he would
Being a
waver.
guy that grew up on jazz, I sort of use that's kind of my inner coil, you might call it, in terms of the way I approach, for example, memorizing lines.
Hmm.
If I'm dealing with something that lines that are difficult to memorize, I'll find a musical hook. I'll remember something like it from a song or something, and then just
Hmm.
do that over and over and over again. And
So does
that
music
I like to approach the role sometimes with that improvisational sort of feel. Keeps it kind of fresh and exciting.
I was gonna ask about kind of how the musicality of like spoken word, like when you're your
Yeah.
voice is an instrument. Like so if any
Or like
vocalist
Shakespeare, my
knows,
God.
yeah, it's an
Shakespeare's all
it's
lyrical.
music. It's
It's
music.
all, yeah. And it flows, and you have to understand it. And you have to give yourself to the rhythms of the language.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of there's not that much difference to me. Like I am always on the sonic you know uh like pendulum, like looking at how if you listen to a public speaker, they can be very musical or very theatrical, and
mhm.
it still goes down to like poetry. And poetry is music, and music is poetry. And you
Right.
can find that the delivery, and when you start to learn that, when you start to connect with people, it's how you can have that kind of magic in your
Some
actual performance.
movies you see, I mean, it rarely happens with me because being a movie guy, I'm always looking, for details in the movie. But on those occasions when I don't think that way, and my heart and my head are just drawn into the story, that's when the art really hits you. The emotionality that's magical. That's
Mhm.
something that goes almost beyond the people that made it. There's a universal something that
Yeah,
hits the
that's
head or the
universal.
heart.
key.
Um,
But there's like an idea, like Pete Townsend had this idea there was a universal key that like your
oh,
muse
right.
can tap into, and you tap
Yeah.
into that, and then things just kind of magically happen. It's like
Right.
he just thinks like it's like okay, if you hit that universal key, then the crowd's gonna be in tune, and
There
you're in
once was
tune.
a note,
Yeah,
pure
it's
and
that whole,
easy.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was that part of that whole idea. Lifehouse was a
Right.
big rock opera that did failed. He couldn't
Right.
put it together,
Oh,
but
that's
he
the other thing. That's the other thing. You know, you're gonna, you know, if you only want to do highbrow stuff or you make a bunch of rules for yourself, you're not gonna have any fun. You know, you have to find the fun regardless of the particulars. You have to bring your best, enjoy it, and leave it be. You know.
yeah, it's kind of like when you see that. I mean, Townsend shot for the moon to try to get
Yeah.
this idea of Lifehouse, and then it became the biggest Who album, like Who's Next?
Right, and
Like,
that's what was left.
and it
Yeah.
was like a failure in his mind because he couldn't turn it into the Tommy that he wanted it to be.
A lot
But
of movies that are now regarded as classics had lukewarm to bad box office when they first came out. But they weren't as focused on that then. You know, nowadays it's all about what's the number one blockbuster
with the
thing
box office,
at
yeah,
the box office, you know?
so much about the numbers,
I
you
mean,
know.
Citizen Kane, I think, tanked when it first came out.
Yeah, because it's so
You
weird.
know,
It's so different.
studio disappointed. And
But
now it's regarded as a classic.
Orson Welles was like, I think they were he was talking. I saw some documentary, and there were people asking about these like choices for camera direction and angles, and he was like, everybody saying I was like brilliantly. I didn't know what I couldn't do. He like there's a famous
Right.
conversation where he says like I didn't know that you couldn't do that, so I just
Yeah,
did what I thought you should be able to do.
right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there is an element of risk to the whole thing that I enjoy. There has to be, well, that's the improv guy in me. I
Mhm.
studied improv, you know, for a lot of years. I studied at ACT, the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and we studied a lot about that, about improv. I got pretty good at that over time. And I like to bring that kind of sensibility. You know, I'm clay here, mold me, director person.
I think it's a
Yeah.
good approach. I mean, I think as a creative person, why I've talked to a lot of creative, I've talked to a lot of singer songwriters and artists and filmmakers too. But it always seems to be like this idea that if you're not so like narrow minded, you can have a more expansive um experience. If you try not to
That's
like
the way
limit
I
yourself.
feel.
Yeah, if you
Oh,
limit
yeah.
yourself, I guess either certain things you got to limit, and if you're trying to get a certain thing, right, you're going to limit
Hmm.
parameters. But to be open to the happy accidents, to be open into like the flow state kind of
Yeah.
idea that
Yeah.
you can channel it if you trust yourself. Like if you trust your
That's the best
intentions.
place to be, you
Yeah.
know, because you're pretty much guaranteed to have a really good time if you're approaching it that way, you
Well,
know?
versus like going back and having to recut it and redo it all the
Right.
time.
Right.
Like if you kind of feel like as a songwriter or a musician, if I have to keep on going back and do like
Mhm.
100 takes, maybe I should do the next song. Maybe I like if I have something that flows, like it's just coming together. It's like wow,
Mhm.
that's like something really coming together, and
Yeah.
you just let it happen, right?
Mhm.
Rather than trying to be really anal about like oh every little bar I got to do this. Is like no, you're like why don't you just let it be? Kind of like
Right.
yeah,
Right.
because the stuff that I try to compose, it'll work like 1 out of 100. The things I just let go, those tend to work, like,
Oh,
with,
you
like,
know, I was
full
going to
force.
mention that the writer part of me, I think, counterbalances the actor part of me because we were just talking about this dynamic. When I'm in the
Mhm.
writer mode, I'm the opposite. I'm extremely detail oriented. I'm very structure guy.
Mm.
You know, I'm very plot and character oriented, and I beat myself up. I set the bar very high when I'm working on a writing project. It's kind of the
Oh, that's
opposite. It's like the
interesting.
actor needs looseness and space to fine things. And the writer needs structure and balance and order to things.
That's
So,
interesting. So you have that dichotomy of
yeah.
having both sides, which I think is also it's always good to have a kind of reference point
Hmm.
to look at it and say, well, what can I kind of cross mix?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like because some things are kind of like, what does that serve this project to do this, or does this project require something else? And so
Hmm. And you
sometimes the
never
template
know.
is
You
fluid.
never know what's coming
Yeah,
at you.
yeah,
Yeah.
your template could be fluid or be willing to change it.
I've gone to auditions where going in, I'll read the sides and I'll see who the character is, and I'll know in my gut I'm not right for it.
Oh wow.
This guy isn't me. Some tough guy, cop, character, whatever. Certain things, I just know this is. I go in, I give it my best anyway. I mean,
Did
throw
you
a
ever
Hail
get a
Mary
part
pass.
like that? Did you ever get a part where you thought I don't really fit, and then they picked you?
I think that happened on a stage play one time. I kind of didn't care, and the audition didn't go so well, and they ended up casting me in a leading part in the thing. Um, so yeah, that happens occasionally. You never know, and I always caution other actors to remember that there are all kinds of factors at work that you might not know about. There may be things about the character that they're thinking, or what if he looked like this? You never know what they're going in with. So it behooves you to kind of roll with it.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's
Let it
kind of like
be.
yeah, you kind of got to be like you said. You got to be able to be like clay and mold to the
Right.
situation. If you have too much of a preconceived, you know, this has got to be like this,
Hmm.
then you're probably not in the
Yeah,
right.
I saved that for the writing because there's nobody there to overrule me. I'm the one making the decision, but not with acting.
So what was the impetus to actually write How Not to Make It in Hollywood? Like what was
Well,
the
you
that's a
know
really interesting title.
what I thought of was my life down there was not atypical. There's thousands of actors who are out there slogging away at it. And I kind of thought, whenever you go in the bookstore, there's always so and so's biography or a story about so and so. Here's how Marilyn Monroe became a star, that kind of stuff. And I thought, nobody's ever written about all the thousands of actors who aren't necessarily stars, but actually work in the business.
Working actor,
And
yeah.
there's sort of the unknown actors. In fact, the book is dedicated to the unknown actor.
Kind of like the working musician, like the studio musicians that nobody really
Hmm.
knows. Like the Funk Brothers, no people know them now. But at the time, the people were like, well, like who's doing it? Well, Barry Gordy's doing it.
Also, I
Who else
really
is doing it?
wanted to make my story kind of a cautionary tale. I'm very honest about my screw ups. I talk a lot about the dumb choices I made and situations I probably should have avoided. And I try to clue in the reader to avoid that stuff.
So like
Here's
lessons learned.
the dumb thing I did. Don't do that. So it's sort of a reverse advice book. How not to make it in Hollywood. How this is
Well,
what
that's
not to
interesting.
do.
It's like a lessons learned. You're actually teaching.
Right.
In a way, like you're paying it forward to the next generation of
Right.
people who
And
read
I
your book.
say also in the book that I wish there had been such a book available to me when I first came down there. I really could have used some guidance and advice and a little pat on the back, somebody to steer you in the right direction.
It's,
I hope the book
it's
serves that
important because
function.
a lot of times everybody. Well, I think like it's really important for a book like yours to exist because like so many people are always focused on the apex alpha level people and they
Right.
never think that's not everybody in any industry.
Yeah.
Like there's more room than that, and you might think, well, I can't do it unless I'm gonna come off, you know,
Hmm.
like Orson Welles. I'm gonna be, you know,
Right.
you know, I'm gonna be like, one of these
Or
apex
some actors
people.
aren't satisfied if they're not a superstar. You know, like I have to be number one or I have to be in the top 10. You know, I don't really care about that. I'm more interested in working,
Yeah, you're working.
hopefully
It's
as
like a
much as
working
possible.
musician. Yeah, the
Yeah.
working musicians, a lot of times they're not household names, but
Hmm.
they're working, and they can be working and actually doing okay, and they're loving what they do.
A lot
And
of my coaches down in Hollywood were working character actors who did coaching on the side. Some of them I really admired. They were fairly well known supporting character actors,
because they
and they
love the
were
craft,
excellent
right?
teachers too.
It's a lot about loving the craft and kind of playing it forward and showing people there is a way to work in
Yeah.
your industry and not just you don't have to be Tom Hanks, to actually
Hmm.
walk in the door. You can actually be in the industry, and which is like
Yes.
a lot of people feel like the entry levels to certain industries is just so like such a big Mount Everest lift that they won't
The
even
other
try.
thing is, leading men and women sometimes come and go, but character actors are kind of a consistent. They're in every script. There's always supporting character actor roles, no matter what. So in a way, it's even safer because I had actor friends that kind of were on their way up and became semi-successful, and then it kind of petered out. That
Oh,
happens
and they
too.
Yeah, it's like anybody, like you're the one hit wonder. Like if you get the one hit wonder versus the consistent kind of touring
Right.
professional musician, they can do studio work, they can do
Yeah.
tour work, they can bounce around, they can be on in anybody's band, right? And
Right.
actually do the work, but nobody really knows them. Like some the diehards know who they are, but like
Hmm.
they're just a work. They show up. The fact is that they're reliable.
That's what I am, damn. I'm a utilitarian actor. I'm the guy to call if something went funky and you need, somebody to be there on time and get it done.
But
Just give me a
there's
call.
something about that. Well, yeah, well, that keeps the ball rolling. It keeps the project happening. You have to have people that you can count on. And
Hmm.
sometimes at the alpha level, it's kind of inconsistent, you know,
Yeah.
kind of up and down on the wave. It's like there's a wave and it goes crashing down, and like there's a lot of
Yeah, that must be tough. That must be tough to like kind of think you're really rolling and then it all
it
just
drops
goes
down.
away. I had
Yeah,
one friend who actually um he got a huge job on a soap opera. He had to go to New York to do the job. Um and, big time, big network soap opera. I saw him not only on the show, but he was on the cover of soap opera fan magazines and stuff. And then his character got written out of the show and it ended, you
wow,
know?
that's bad. It's a bad
So
break.
but unfortunately that's actually a much more frequent story than most people know about. They
What
kind
happens,
of
like yeah.
stars get a lot of the oxygen. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because the problem is like if you get tagged, like unlike like where you're a working artist and then you get tagged in that role,
Hmm.
right? And then the role goes away, it might be harder to transition into the kind of utilitarian or
Yeah.
where you could be on multiple projects because nobody's typecasting you into that or
Right.
seeing you as that. But once somebody sees you as like that one hit wonder, like you're always playing that song. Like every
My
time
my
you're
my
on stage.
father had a couple of roles on TV as a judge. Back in the 80s, he was on LA Law. So because he played a judge on that show, two other shows called him with a judge
Keep on putting him
part
on the judge.
because he
Yeah.
was the judge.
You
Here
got on
comes
Law and
yeah,
Order, rotated.
yeah.
But I do that thing on Law and Order when I recognize sometimes an actor will come in, they'll be the criminal. And then later you'll
Oh,
see them
right.
be the DA. And later they'll be the detective because, oh, I like this guy. Let's bring him back, but we're gonna change him and act like you never saw him. and he's actually now he's the DA, and he was the criminal before.
Mhm. Bad guys are fun.
Yeah,
Criminals and maniacs, they're a lot of fun.
yeah. It's probably easier to play a bad guy than a good guy. Is that the
I had
truth? It's like
one
rather
part
play a
where I
bad
did
guy than a good
actually
guy?
get to play a maniac once.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Is it? Do you feel better when you're playing like the that type of character? Like,
Yeah, yeah, because it's a challenge. It's a challenge. You gotta bring it. Um, you know, that one TV gig that I had where I played the crazy guy, that was a dream come true because I had privately fantasized about that. I said, yeah,
mm,
I'd really like to play a lunatic. And then I just scored it. They just that was a little bit of a dream come true. Yeah.
that's awesome. You kind of put it out there, and the universe gave it to you from a
Right.
Buddhist perspective. Because the
Right.
law of
Thank you,
attraction kind
God.
of like if you put
Yeah.
it out there, we tend to like, oh, if you put out that vibe, you keep on feeling it,
Right.
like things kind of happen, and it's not exactly coming happen because like you're focusing
Right.
on it and things happen. But yeah, that's interesting. And I've always seen this idea where like all comedians are very talented and be able to do multiple roles. They could get into drama. Like a
Right.
comedian could do
Right.
drama, but maybe the drama actor can't do comedy.
I'm sort of everything bends comedic with me. Even sometimes in writing, sometimes I think I'm writing something serious, but it'll be coming out funny anyway. Um, so I guess comedy is fun like that, but drama is just as big a challenge. I kind
Mhm.
of enjoy them both just as much because they're challenges in different ways,
Different ways,
depending
yeah,
upon
to
what the
come at it.
material is.
Yeah, to come at it from that comedic perspective. But usually in comedy, there's some level of tragedy in it.
Yeah, if it's good.
It's
Yeah,
good, and that you figure how to pull it, you know,
right.
how to actually carry it over. But there's
Mhm.
usually some aspect of it that's deeper than what it appears to be.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that's
Well, I'm
interesting.
at a
Like,
point right now where this is a pretty good year. I mean, I got a book out on Amazon. I got a
mhm.
movie coming out, all in the same year. So, and my birthday was last week. So this
Does
is
that kind of situation kind of lead to more work because you're on a kind of roll? Like if
well,
you
we'll
get on
see
a
what
roll,
happens when this movie comes out. I
mhm.
felt really good about doing it, and I think it's an intelligent script. It's going to be a good movie, and then we'll see. See if the phone rings.
Is that how your agent like pitches the next thing? Because they show you like, oh,
Right,
you
right,
do this, and
and
then you,
also how well the movie's received.
mhm.
Um,
So it's a numbers game still, with like the metrics.
yeah, still, and the reviews too.
Mhm.
Sometimes things are a critical hit and a box office failure. Never
Oh, then
know.
you care. Then you use the critical review, like the Velvet Underground got 5 stars, but they didn't sell anything.
Right, that's
Right,
right.
so but the 5 stars gets you the opportunity, to work with Bowie and do Walk on the Wild Side.
Right, right.
So it's like sometimes it's like if you can get to the right people to see something, and like the New York
Oh
critics like
yes.
give you a good review, is there certain like sets of critics that are better than others to give you like the right pump up?
Oh God, the critics. uh, I don't
Give your
know.
opinion or your opinion
I mean, there are people sitting on the sidelines voicing opinions about things. I mean, one
yeah,
guy's favorite movie is the one the other guy hates. It's a
yeah.
very personal
Very
sort of
subjective.
thing.
They're very subjective, but they try and act
Yeah.
like they're experts on everything, but it's still like, what is it that you like? That's
Oh,
it's not a
I'd
science.
be happy to hit one person. I'd be happy if one person enjoyed the movie and got something out of it. That's good enough for me. Um, you're trying to communicate with people, so if that communication gets across, that's gravy. Um,
Yeah, like you said, sometimes things are not initially received and then later
yeah,
they're understood.
and then
So it's
they're
kind of
in history. They're regarded as classics. Yeah,
there's a lot of I watch a Turner movie classic movie channel. I'm watching a lot of stuff, that, you go back and say, "Wow, this didn't really work," and then like, well, everybody today knows this is a really big thing, but at the time
Mhm.
it came out, it wasn't a big thing, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
"Wow." And you
Right.
don't know that till you hear about it. It's like, well, this is then you actually hear the real story. It's like, wow,
Mhm.
this wasn't as well received as like it is now. Kind of like William Blake as a poet. Like he wasn't known in the Victorian era.
Uh-huh.
As a Victorian poet, he was only known after he was gone.
Oh, so in that vein, I write in the book about John Wilkes Booth's older brother. John Wilkes Booth's older brother, Edwin Booth, was a renowned Shakespearean actor. In his day, he was called like the best Hamlet of the time.
Oh wow.
So all his life, John Wilkes Booth was kind of overshadowed by the
Overshadowed by his
grandeur of
brother.
his brother's success. And I was always sort of interested in that particular grudge of his, because
That's
that plus his Confederate sympathies, I think led up to that, him
a moment.
shooting
Yeah.
president.
You gotta kind of understand like the motivations if you actually detail it beyond that. Like, oh,
Also
he
was
just
in a theater. He was an actor, the whole
yeah,
theatrical deal.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
different way to look at
I have
it.
a chapter on that. Yeah.
Well, that's a deep, it's always interesting to kind of look at, things from all sides with
Mhm.
tendency to focus on the kind of obvious side. That's easier to carry over than actually look at the multifaceted aspects.
Right.
And as I guess as an actor, that's your like when you get a character to actually implement from a
I
writer.
think probably when I read a script, it's probably like you when you're reading music, and you're reading it for the feel and the rhythm and the characters and I can usually tell right away when I read a script whether there's a character there I can do or not. I know immediately.
Hmm.
Oh, that's the guy. I can do that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, what you can bring to it, right? So you know
Mhm.
how you're gonna approach it and give it like the person that's you. You're gonna give it,
Right.
it's David Hern treatment.
Correct. The David Hern treatment. That's the best treatment you can get.
So I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. I want to also
Absolutely, Mr.
uh,
Phantom Man.
let people know
It
they
was
should check out
fun.
your book. Maybe put your book up again so they can
Oh,
see it.
yes. It's available on Amazon Books. How Not to Make It in Hollywood. And look for Thirsty, opening hopefully at a theater near you relatively soon.
That's awesome. I wish you
And
would a lot of
if
success.
any of your viewers want to get a hold of me for some reason, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get a message to me.
Oh, LinkedIn. Okay.
Just look up my name, David Hern, Hern, on LinkedIn, and you can send me a message. And
That's
thank
awesome.
you very much, Phantom, for your musical expertise and your probing questions.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. A lot of everybody know we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be on all the major podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. Thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
All
I
right.
love talking to you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.